Hello.
Hello, mate.
How you doing?
Yeah, not bad, are you?
I'm all right. So earlier I went for a bike ride and I thought, oh, the weather's calmed down because it's cloudy, but it was raining earlier and it's calmed down. And then 30 seconds into starting my bike ride, the heavens opened and I looked like a drowned rat.
Yeah, it was literally, I went for a cycle today and I knew where that conversation was going.
Yeah,
You didn't even
exactly.
need to go any further than that.
Exactly. Like, yeah, pretty much. But just before we get into the main topic, which is the corruption within FIFA,
Yeah,
I was having a really interesting discussion with my family. I say my family, my dad and my stepbrother. My stepmom was just kind of there. Um, we were talking about Alex Ferguson and Man United because
okay.
he was obviously a very successful manager and everything, but he didn't leave Man United in a really good state when he left. You think about the team that was left when he retired, how many of those would should be playing for a Premier League champion? I wouldn't have said many of them really.
I don't know. I think it's one of those things where they ended up going their ways, with, was it Tom Cleverley? He ended up going to, he plays for Watford now. You've had like Rafael and Fabio who've gone to play in like the Brazilian and Portuguese leagues. So I see your point, but I also feel like with football, it's it's difficult to say because, of course, we're not at the level that he could see, all these footballers and athletes performing at. So I feel like it's one of those things where you have a group of people working for you and they identify who would play good and who might not play well. And you are right to say that they could have been shit players and not the best team that he could have left them with. But also, I feel like him and his knowledge, he could have gotten as you said, average Man United team to win the league, which he did.
Mm.
So I don't know. There's a counter argument to that, which I'm not sure because I'm not an entire expert on that.
Sure,
So I
yeah.
wouldn't be able to say.
And I realise I've just thrown that on you, but you can definitely draw parallels with Bill Belichick, who's the coach of the New England Patriots. They've won 6 Super Bowl titles in the 20 years that he's been there, and he's done it with teams of. There aren't many like superstars that you see on the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
Everyone there's a couple of really good players, obviously, that do very well for them. But when you look at the team that won the Super Bowl in, I think 2014, I want to say, they were seen as a very average team, and they had no right to be there. So the point I'm making is that great coaches will get the best out of their team, no matter the standard of the player, pretty much.
Exactly, and I was just about to bring Porto, 2004, and Marino went and won the Champions League with them. I
Mm.
mean, yeah, they had decent players, but they weren't the Cristiano Ronaldos, the Lionel Messi's, those kind of players to make a team stand out. Even when you've got teams that are not at the level of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus, Bayern Munich, you've still got players who are outstanding in those years where, when teams win the league, you can almost pinpoint, if not say 2 or 3 players where due are due for that success of that team. Whereas with teams like you say, Man United's team back then, yeah, they had like Rooney and they had all those players, but other than that, it was a bang average team. And like you say, he was just a great coach to be able to get the best out of them. So that's why they did so well.
Exactly. And then you see the tail off afterwards where they went off a cliff pretty much. Because didn't they fail to make the Champions League that following season?
Can't say I follow them to
All right, fair enough.
actually know. But I think they have been struggling, haven't they? Like this
Mm.
year, of course, as we're recording it, Leicester has lost to Everton. So Chelsea got the chance, if they beat West Ham, to go and push for third place. And then that
Well,
leaves Man United to get into fourth place. So they do look a little bit better. than they were before. And without jumping on the bandwagon, they've got a good academy. Well, yeah, decent academy, good players coming through. So future's looking bright for them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's pretty much a given that you guys are going to win tonight.
Don't know. I've got it right here playing when we're talking, and it's
So
not looking great.
So I'm going to get live updates. Your people listening to the podcast, you're going to get very delayed updates because this is obviously a Wednesday night, and you're going to get it on Friday morning.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try not to react anyway, but when I look over there and my train of thought is gone, you can kind of know what's going on. I'm going to try and ignore it as much as I can, but if there is a goal, I might flip the table and you'll know what's wrong.
Fuck's sake. Well, yeah, we'll know what's happened. And if West Ham does end up at least getting a draw, I will be loving life. Because everyone else down at the bottom has lost today. And West Ham are in, we're just above the relegation zone. So we really need to get something from our next couple of games. Otherwise, we are pretty screwed.
Not that I have anything against West Ham. Like, I genuinely don't care. But yeah, I would love it if West Ham got relegated. I'll find it so funny.
Well, just to see my despair.
Not anything against you. I just think the club's been in decline for however many years now.
So long.
And it's just like a thing has got to happen before the owners realise that something needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on a massive rant on like how many things are just going so badly right now. We haven't had a proper striker in a good 10 years.
But the thing is, with West Ham, every year you buy a shit striker for an overpriced amount of money, and then it's the same story every year.
Oh my God, who was that Colombian striker who we bought after the World Cup? Oh man, I can't remember. And then we had some really good Italian guy midfielder on loan when Allardyce was our manager, and we never played them. Like, why? Why are we doing this? This is stupid.
Anyway, before you get too into it, this podcast is supposed to be about the corruption within FIFA and not how shit West Ham are. As much as I would like to talk about that, not today. So, shall I kick it off?
Yeah. You've done all the research, so.
Well, I say that. I've done some uni work on that. So basically, what we wanted to talk about is FIFA and how all their illegal, immoral and unethical actions have played out and how bad it looks on them. So, of course, before the American FBI investigation into FIFA, it wasn't really known to the public as such that there was so much corruption within FIFA. Of course, people who liked football, people who, like me and you, who are big fanatics. I was quite conveniently taught by the guy called John Sugden, who was actually a lecturer or professor at the University of Brighton. He actually gave me those lectures, and he was the one who first uncovered those corruption, I guess, threats at the beginning in like 2002. He started looking into it.
Wow.
Yeah. So he, great guy. And he's found all these things where, of course, all these things took a while to actually start churning and people start realizing it. And having looked at some of the FIFA stuff where they've been getting worse and worse as the years went on, it's been horrific to really see what is going on. So without going too far behind, of course, it all really kicked off in 2014, where the World Cup in Brazil was announced, was it in 2007, 2008? I think they're supposed to announce it 7 years before. And one of the venues that FIFA instructed Brazil to build a stadium at was in Manaus. That stadium is in the middle of a rainforest, so there's literally nothing around for...
There's no major cities or anything?
No. I mean, it's not, a city of a few million. There's, I would probably say, a town of however many thousands of people in it. And with its location, it was literally in the middle of a rainforest. So if you kind of picture a map of Brazil where you've got pretty much the coastline and all the big cities around it. Where you've got the northern western part, it's all the Amazon rainforests. Mm. If you literally pinpoint to the most northwest of the Brazilian region of like before its borders, that's where Manaus is. And that's where FIFA went, we want you to build a stadium there, which is a big stadium, you know, it seated however many thousands of people, build it brand new. And we have no kind of vision to what it's going to be used for after. We don't care. You just build it for the World Cup. It will be used for 3 games.
How much did it cost them to build that? Do you know?
$270 million.
So $270 million, and it was used for 3 games.
Whose money was used? Do you know?
Probably Brazil.
Brazilian taxpayers.
Oh, of course.
This is where things get good, right? So, of course, you've got the 270 million US dollars, where that was just the construction costs. You've also got the maintenance costs for when it's running and when it's completed to actually maintain it, because you've built a stadium for that amount of money. You might as well maintain it.
Exactly. You're not just going to let it rot.
No. So there also has been some human costs in it as well, which I'll be touching base in a little bit if we want to go into it. So it's not a good start, is it?
No, it's really not.
So going from that, basically there's been other research saying that there's no transparency from FIFA to why they're making those decisions. You know, they're a private organization that are paid from public money, from taxpayers' money from those countries to secure those events. And when that has been investigated to show those findings, people have started questioning to why it was chosen to be Brazil. So there's, of course, no evidence as of yet to why it was Brazil. And with the 2 later World Cups, as we very well know, they wouldn't have been picked just for the sake of being picked, would they? They would have been given a bit of cash on the side.
If you were looking at it objectively, let's look at Qatar, right? Qatar is one of the Middle Eastern Emiratis, one of those, it's really hot in the summertime. It gets upwards of 40, 45 degrees. You would not want to be playing football in those kinds of conditions, let alone their human rights record. I don't know if I wouldn't be surprised to learn that homosexuality would be illegal in somewhere like Qatar. I don't know if it is. What a surprise. And a Middle Eastern nation that outlaws that kind of thing. I am totally shocked.
I mean, there's only one democracy in the Middle East, and we're not really going to have a discussion about this because this isn't what this pod is about. But what was saying to you about the human costs. So I've got some data from FIFA's corruption, basically, and how many lives have been lost building sorts of like these venues for the Olympics, for the World Cups. So this data goes from 2010. So it's not really very, very exact in the figures of 2010, like when they were building the World Cup. There was 2 deaths when they were building all these sites. So, of course, with it being in December 2010, that would have been post the World Cup in 2010. So that's not really exact data. But as we go further on, we're looking at London 2012, where there was 1 death. I'm not sure how that happened, but there was 1 death aligned with building the sites and the construction of sites and whatnot. And then we go into the 2014 Sochi Olympics, where that's increased to 60, funnily enough.
Christ.
Yep.
Massive jump.
Yep. And we look at the 2014 World Cup, and that's at 50. So again, you know, it's not great.
Mm-hmm.
And then we look at Qatar, where, of course, that's still going on, where it's still being built.
It's due for 2022, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So I've got all this information in 2015, 2016, I think. This is a good 4 years old, this stuff, right? So it could be much higher. The figure for Qatar is 1,200 4 years ago. So
1,204 years ago when they got the bid accepted in what, 2010, 2011?
2011, yeah.
What? So in 5 years they had
So to put
1,000
it into
deaths.
perspective, they had no stadiums there. They probably had like a pitch with about 3 seats on the side of it
Yeah.
for the local football team, right? And then now they've had to build like what, 6, 7, 8 stadiums of at least 30, 40,000 capacity.
That's stupid.
And of course, there's no human rights there. They bring in excuse me, migrant workers who just come in, and then if they fall off, they're like, "Oh, okay, that's a shame. We'll just put some dust over them. It's fine. No one will know."
Yeah, just put some concrete over the top. It's all good.
Yeah, and it's just like FIFA does nothing about it because they get their revenues out of it when it all comes out, and they've got all these sponsors coming in and saying, "Oh yeah, well, Budweiser sponsoring this, I don't know, Coke is sponsoring that. We get our money. We don't care. Like we don't really need to leave a legacy. We just need to leave the entertainment aspect of it on the TV where people watch it, and that's all we need."
I mean, I was looking at, I did a little bit of reading before this,
Yeah,
and I saw that they generated, I think, $4 billion in revenue from the previous World Cup
was
in
that in
Brazil,
2018 or 2014?
in the 2014 World Cup.
Right.
And that's set to only increase. And FIFA's only source of revenue is from the World Cup. They don't make money from anything else, apparently. I might be wrong.
So they had this interview with Sepp Blatter before everything kicked off, and things started to get a bit heated up. The question to him was, why is there $1 trillion in FIFA's bank account? His answer was, in case we needed it for reserves. It's like $1 trillion for reserves.
That is ultra conservative. In case something really goes wrong.
In case we need to save the world. Is $1 trillion not going to basically save you the world?
Oh my God. You could basically buy Facebook.
Well, yeah. Not that you would want to nowadays. It's probably
no, I know, but that's how much money these people have. And it's for what? It's just sitting there, supposedly.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It's sitting there. And where did you get that money from? Because you have no accountability for it, and an organisation like you should have accountability for it. So where did you get that money from? I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, you're literally the president of the biggest sporting association in the world, and you don't know. How does that come across? Anyway, so how did they get to that position? How do they build that power? So I don't know if you know of crony capitalism.
Crony capitalism, is that basically... I don't know. Go on.
So it's basically a theory where they have a system of preferential regulations and other favourable interventions based on personal relationships. Basically, what that means
Legalised
is
bribery.
In a way, yeah. What that means is the likes of Sepp Blatter will go and hire his mate or his, I don't know, his son-in-law or whatever relative he could have. He would hire him. They would potentially be unqualified and inexperienced, just so he'll be able to manipulate them and use them for his power and to build that organization to be more corrupt than they already are. So there's a load of research being found, investigated that not so much capitalism, but more of that cronism, I think they call it, that it's a large part of the corruption because people like Blatter, and I'm not just singling him out because there's loads of other people who do it. They will hire a mate or a friend or, a family relative who hasn't got enough experience and hasn't got enough qualifications to do the high job that they're required to, but because they will be willing to accept bribes, they'll be hired for that job. It's the same with nepotism. Where
I was about to say it's nepotism 101.
It's basically the same thing. So you look at that, and that kind of power of money, that's what influences all these relationships within these organizations. So you get the likes of Budweiser coming in and they're saying, right, well, we've paid you this amount of money. We could be looking at paying in the same amount of money, where, I don't know, Budweiser might not, but another sponsor might have routes where they're not handling their production at the best ways, i.e. human rights issues, with some companies like Nike, like Adidas, doing all that shit in China for literally no money. FIFA wouldn't put it past them. They're like, oh, we get money. We don't care. We'll just, we can advertise them at halftime as long as they give us the money. My mate is the head of marketing. He'll accept that. So it gets on from that. And that's where, I mean, in Brazil, it was quite known that there was quite a lot of conflict about, of course, the World Cup first in 2014 and then the Olympics in 2016, where their government has chosen or elected or paid, I don't know what they've done, to host these events where the public didn't feel like they had enough hospitals, they had enough schools being built, but they went and built all these useless stadiums, which aren't really going to leave a legacy. They aren't going to help the local public to actually, benefit and develop from it. Where the society thinks that they will, because Brazil can host a good Olympics or Brazil can host a good World Cup, so they must be a very good nation. But half of that population is living in favelas and poverty, where they can't eat and they haven't got enough healthcare, and it's just horrendous. So that increased a load of protests, and basically what that whole thing is that it's a tool of the healthy, where they increase this emphasis of the sponsors to increase, where we look at, sponsors in the World Cup 2002, it's 100% hasn't got the same amount of sponsors as the World Cup in 2018, where the World Cup 2018 is bound to have however many hundreds of sponsors and, affiliations and all that stuff. You wouldn't have that. Even in 2014, the more you go back, the less sponsors you have, because you've got all these powers like the senior management, or whatever you want to call them, of FIFA, where they're saying, well, actually, let's continue adding to that $1 trillion in our reserves, because that's clearly not enough to do anything we want to do with it.
Well, they're also adding to that in another way, because they're expanding the World Cup, aren't they, to include more teams? So they're expanding to include, I think, 48 teams now, which is mental.
Yes, it is.
Every
mental.
man and his dog's going to be able to play in the World Cup soon.
Tell me about it. Fucking San Marino are going to get into it next year.
They are, aren't they?
So what, this 48 team World Cup, right? It's a way for them to televise more. It's a way for them to sell more match tickets, and it's a way for them to eventually increase revenues with those two aspects. So with those two revenues increased, again, it's only going to increase their profit margins, where they don't really have to put any money towards building the stadiums or actually hosting these events that the countries are doing, where the taxpayers' money goes into it. And then they're the ones who are suffering afterwards, when their tax money has gone onto building a useless stadium that's been used for 3 matches, and now the local football team kick a football around in it, and then you've got, out of a 30,000 capacity stadium, you've got 29,500 empty seats. So it's crazy what this sort of mentality that FIFA have. And of course you've got Sepp Blatter, who's been banned from football for 8 years or something stupid like that, hasn't even been put in prison. And you've got the likes of Michel Platini, where he's the head of UEFA, and he's like, oh yeah, I didn't know what's his name was corrupt and whatnot. So that's bullshit, because he was a mate of Sepp Blatter's, who was hired to be the head of UEFA. So he literally came from being a footballer to straight away being the head of UEFA. So you've got that with so many different positions where the root is so deeply ingrained in these associations or federations, whatever you want to call them, where you're not just going to be able to get rid of it by just picking out one person. You need to wipe out the whole thing with what's his name? Jack Walker. Is that his name? Being another example where
You're talking about the Caribbean guy who took bribes.
Yeah. Where, they had a panel of like 12 people there, and you think, geez, only 12 people. Where are the other 100 or so where, they know of it and they haven't mentioned it? But then again, you look at it and you think the FBI have unfolded this corruption in FIFA, but where have they been since? Because I haven't heard anything for how many years now?
No. And we're, I read an article that was talking about FIFA's corruption, like when it all surfaced, and this was in late 2015, was when it surfaced, and it compared it to today. And on the surface, nothing seems to have changed. Because who's the head of FIFA now? It's that bald fella. I can't remember his name.
I was literally just about to say, I just know what he looks like, and he's a baldy.
Yeah, he's just some bald man from...
He's supposed to be, Swiss or Italian? Something like that.
Okay.
Jan something.
But they compared his re-election to that of Sepp Blatter. There was no opponent standing against him. Like he, when he spoke at some sort of FIFA conference, it was they compared it to Stalin almost, where people clapped when they were supposed to, and it was a very curated event. And he just was re-elected like very easily.
Yeah, well, they had that with Luis Figo was going to run for president, wasn't he?
Of Portugal.
Yeah, however many years ago, when it was all unfolded that Plata was, going to go to prison, and then he wasn't going to be allowed to be there anymore, and all that sort of stuff. And a day before the election, he pulled out, and I think there was that guy left, or there was someone else left, and he never ended up running for it. So I wonder if he realized that he was just going to be voted out because he wanted to actually start it fresh. And it could have been corrupt as well. I don't know. I really don't know. But I feel like him giving interviews afterwards and listening to him, he genuinely thought that he could have made a change. And maybe he realized that it wasn't going to be possible to be doing it when you've got 99 people against you and you're on your own.
Yeah, but when the whole culture is corrupt, like how do you change that really?
It's like in a job interview. If someone asks you, what do you do? Do you go work for a company with a good strategy, or do you go work for a company with a good culture? Well, I would always say go work for a company with a good culture, because that can't be changed overnight like a strategy can.
That's very true, actually. I've never thought about it like that before.
Not just the pretty face, Not even that sometimes.
And you definitely are the pretty face.
Well, hey, don't flatter me now.
So what else have you got on FIFA?
So, I mean, it's just the basics, really, of, just an observation of where their headquarters are, where it's in a tax evading heaven, isn't it? Country in Switzerland, where they can just get away with things without paying for tax. And I know that they're not the only international federation to do that, because you've got cricket. I think they've based themselves in Dubai somewhere, which is very convenient again for tax. And you've got others doing the same thing. And it's just, from my point of view, it's horrific that these sporting federations are supposed to be looking after everyone in the world playing that sport, and all they're doing is just trying to scrape the pennies together instead of actually saying, do you know what, we'll come out with good policies and we'll do it the right way around. No, we're just going to go and try and not pay tax, and we're going to try and get around things by increasing our 1 trillion in reserves that we're going to double anyway by whatever year. And it's just very sad to think that if that's the top of the sporting tree, and you've got, if we look at it as society, right? So we look at these sporting federations as the upper class, where you've got all those executives up there. The performers and the athletes are going to be at the lower class, aren't they? They are the lower class who are running about like headless chickens, essentially earning the money.
Well, they're the employees, yeah. They're the window dressing that actually are the production. Sorry.
Yeah, and when you look at it in the way of, you've got athletes like Ronaldo and Messi, and of course you've got thousands and thousands more where they're earning these sponsorship deals. That's the only real way out of it, isn't it? Where they can earn more income through other ways rather than just their contract with their clubs or federations or whatever sport it may be. So you've got these managers and coaching staff that are the middle class, that they're kind of controlling it, and they're essentially dependent on the lower class working and doing their bit, which feeds up. But it takes no... I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but I think what I'm meaning is that the tree is very awfully placed because the athletes are the ones who are facing the public, and they're the ones who can show and entertain everyone. But the upper class in this case are running it like they're the ones in control, because the athletes can say, "Oh, I don't want to go to the World Cup in Qatar because however many thousands of people died." And if national teams start to do that, what are FIFA going to do? Because that will be a boycott of them basically being idiots.
Yeah. I think you'd need to see a lot of national teams start to protest before you started to see anyone back out. And I can't imagine any footballer in their prime is going to back out of a World Cup, because everyone wants to say that they've played in a World Cup, or considering how well teams like Germany historically do, they would reasonably be in with a chance of winning. So would you, as a player, want to forfeit your opportunity to potentially win a World Cup for a human rights issue? And selfishly, if I was in that position, I don't know that I would. Morally, it's the correct thing to do. However, the opportunity to say that you're a World Cup winner is one that a potential that you can't really turn down ever.
Absolutely. And I think, a World Cup can only come around once in your life. It's one of those things that you don't know if you're ever making it. You could get injured right before the World Cup, or, the World Cup is such a big thing where players will push out of clubs to know that they're getting first team throughout the whole year so they can have more of a chance to be selected. So I absolutely understand how big a World Cup is. And I think from that, it's more of the actual national associations have to push for it more, where I think there was talk of, I think it was the English national team saying that they're still going to go to the World Cup. But there was talk of them potentially not going. And they wanted to get other teams to do the same thing, but everyone just went, "Oh yeah, we'll just put our heads down and get on with it." Where that kind of mentality, if you don't even raise the issue of, "Oh, well, we are going to go, but we're not happy with this treatment, we're not happy with what you're doing," could actually make a difference.
Well, we saw a similar sort of thing in Russia in the 2018 World Cup, because Russian football hooligans have a storied recent history with racism and racist chants and things. And so a bunch of players, I think Raheem Sterling was amongst one of them, who said, we're really not happy with this racist abuse that we get. And, you saw a bunch of other players speak out, but has anything really changed?
I know for a fact Russian hooligans go to matches to fight, not to actually watch football.
Well, that's
So
like English football fans in the 70s and 80s, wasn't it? They went to fight, not for the football.
yeah, so it wouldn't surprise me if nothing has changed. And I see where you're coming from, but with everyone just putting their head down and getting on with it, like it's nothing. You've got thousands of, put aside lives lost. At the extreme, it is lives lost, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But you've got all these people, like I've mentioned, with taxpayers' money going on these stadiums that are useless in the long run, instead of being built hospitals and schools and things that are actually going to last and provide education for people that don't have the opportunities. That's what drives me insane, because that's a chain reaction where they're not having a good life and they will die prematurely because they're still living in favelas and they can't get education. They're literally, working at the age of 12, 14 just to get a few pennies home. And I'm not saying that's worse than dying, but I'm just saying that it's such an awful thing to have that everyone's just putting their head down and not really noticing.
Well,
I feel like it needs to be noticed more.
This goes back to what I was saying previously, where this is why we're starting to see an uptick in authoritarian regimes applying to host World Cups and Olympics, because they don't care about the human cost. They only care about putting on this great show, putting on this great spectacle, and human rights for them are a second issue. And FIFA won't mind as long as it brings the revenue in. So, it's a very worrying trend to see a lot more authoritarian regimes that don't care about this suddenly be put center stage for these types of events.
Yeah, I mean, not going too far off, London 2012 cost us, was it 9.2 billion pounds or something like that. I'm not sure how much it returned in revenues for tourism and whatnot, but I don't think it had a massive effect. So we did put out a good Olympics. I'm not going to say we didn't, because I think we did. But could that 9.3 billion been spent elsewhere? Yes. Could it have been spent better? Probably yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That's, I guess, my question to the people that are not in the lower class and have to continually work all the time to actually survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question of decision making in these types of situations. Like the most recent situation that I can think of, where people have gone, "Hey, what the fuck?" When it comes to spending, is Boris Johnson's plane got a paint job done, and that cost the taxpayer 900 grand to get this one plane done when we've got starving children that desperately need meals.
Yeah. I mean, I know where you're heading towards with Rashford and what he's doing, which is, I'm not saying he's doing a bad job. I think it's brilliant what he's doing. But I also feel like some children shouldn't be conceived when their parents can't afford them. And that's a very, we're getting very political now. So I think we need to be very careful. But I get there's certain circumstances where, God forbid, whatever happens to your parents and the child is left alone and they haven't got food and whatnot, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I'm saying in some circumstances, we need to be very careful with where we tread, because once you start giving, just like we all know with furlough, no one wants to go back to work because they've gotten free money, basically. And that's the same with getting free food. And there needs to be a very right balance there, because everyone should be given food.
Yeah.
But also, it needs to be met for the actual children that can't have food, rather than those ones who parents can't be bothered to give them food.
Right. So that okay. So your concern isn't actually. So your concern is more so making sure the right people are prioritized, as opposed to just saying all poor people shouldn't eat, basically, which makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Like I saw something recently that criticized Keir Starmer, who's the Labour leader, who Labour's the opposition to the Conservative Party here, who are in power right now, and he proposed that people who commit benefit fraud be imprisoned for up to 10 years. Okay. So, and someone was using that to criticize him. And I was like, well, that makes perfect sense. If you commit benefit fraud, then you deserve a punishment for that.
Absolutely. And I think there's quite a lot of furlough that's going to be going off now. Hopefully in the next few years, HMRC are going to clamp down on it, which is great, because I think everyone should be lawfully living, as that's what civilization is. If we don't have laws and we don't follow them, then what civilization do we have? So yeah, going slightly off topic, I think we need to be very careful with giving people free things and getting the right balance to actually giving people that need it, rather than giving just people things for the sake of giving them things.
But then obviously you want to make sure that everyone has a good level of a good standard of living, and that's where people can perhaps misinterpret what you're saying, because you're obviously not saying that every child in a poor living situation deserves. I know, but some people will hear that and they'll be like, "Oh, Dan thinks that children should starve to death," and it's like, no. This is a nuanced discussion.
I thought I clarified that before I started saying that. What I'm saying is, if you've got someone who gets when they don't need it, and I'm not saying furlough wasn't needed, because of course it was needed, but furlough in this example is what I'm using. Yeah. Where people didn't do anything for 80% of their wage. I mean, I personally loved it. I know everyone loved it, right? And then all of a sudden you have to go back to doing the same thing, if not more, from what you were doing before lockdown at work, because you've got to fill up for those people who haven't returned yet. Yeah. And you're only working for the 20% extra, which is actually, in that instance, you're being taxed on or whatnot. So it's not really much more. And you're having to work. I'd rather not work. Yeah. So that's where we need to get a good balance, because we can very easily build a very rotten culture, I feel, where we can expect to just be getting things rather than work for them. And that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying anyone should starve or whatsoever. I'm just saying we need to get the right balance of who we give it to. Exactly. Yeah. You've got to be, Yep. You've summarized that perfectly, really. And hopefully that clears up for anyone who's trying to kill me now. Exactly. In 5 years, we're going to get cancelled, and you can get fucked. You can get fucked, by the way. So Dan, what else have you got on FIFA? Well, I can. Have you exhausted ranting. Yeah, I think I can continue ranting about them for hours on end, but I think that will probably be enough for today, where we've kind of touched on some theories and what they do, how they run, and how bad they are, really. So hopefully anyone who's listened to us enjoyed this. Hopefully I didn't rant too much to bore you to death. But if you have stayed listening to this, thank you very much for listening to me. I very much appreciate it. So tune back in on the next pod, whenever that's going to be. Yep. Thank you if you got to this point. Absolutely. Mondays and Fridays. Thank you if you got to this point, and we'll see you again next time. Cheers.